So I'll tell you, the things they want to talk about, the things I want to talk about are kind of crazy. It's stupid stuff in Jeff's head for 200, Alex. What are we talking about, Jeff?
Dang. Yep, that's right. Another episode of What Are We Talking About, Jeff? Now, I've kind of left that out in vague. What are we talking about? Like you could be asking me that, or what are we talking about, Jeff? So it kind of leaves it open to interpretation or whatever you feel I'm talking about today. Well, today, what we're going to talk about is, for me, the music industry and my experience, maybe moments that have happened, but a lot of my experience has come around the Milwaukee area in the Wisconsin vein. So, obviously, my perspective is skewed in that way. I guess I'm not talking from a national perspective, but I have my experience that way. I've opened for many artists. I've met a number of people. Uh, if it were significant, I'd be national, but maybe you guys make that happen. I don't know. But welcome out to the show. I am so excited to be running this thing out there in DAHL Media Studios. Right here was our creation. The creation started with the idea that I named it after my family. So uh, it's each one of my kids' names and my wife's name with their anagrams. So that's why it's DAHL Media. DAHL Media Studios is kind of what we go by, just because there's other DAHL Medias out there and whatnot. And I don't know if there's much else we can do but say it's from Wisconsin. So if that helps you guys, now you know. So what we're talking about today, like I said, the Milwaukee area when it comes to entertainment industry, music in general, and a whole bunch more, because it's me. What are we talking about? I don't know. The tangents that happen, right? So today I went through, and I'm not going to name a whole lot of names unless it's something about what the positive is. I had that happened this morning that kind of irked me, and maybe it was me. Maybe it was me kind of going over the thought process of what I've been doing over the past few years. Uh, Locally, I feel pretty strongly about what I've done in the industry. I guess is that vain. We're talking about me, so screw it. But the idea is, I felt pretty strongly about the product I've put out. I know there's value wise and view wise, there's levels of how strong you can look. And I think, when we look at our industry in Milwaukee area, a group that's done a very good job of that is Rebel Grace and Bella Kane, who's a bit of a show band to me. There's lines of when you can just step up and really nail music, and then there's lines of your all production. But these groups still have very quality people in them, very quality music makers in them too. And I think that when it comes down to music entertainment in general, we all kind of go there. We were just talking about in my prior segment about the Super Bowl halftime and all that stuff, and the quality of lip syncing and all that stuff. Well, obviously I can tell you 90%, I would say 98% or more of Milwaukee bands do not lip sync. I would say 100% of them don't lip sync. But it shows too. We have a ways to bring our quality up live. But I think every industry feels that way about itself, and we all work to improve it. I had a long running debate years ago with a guy who was right. Don't go in wanting to be an A band and be a D band. And we say this as we're just a bunch of local yokels, but you want to, I interpret it when I heard that first statement to me. I interpret that to be you want to look national. Your goal is you want to look like something they've seen on TV. I interpret that when somebody gets on stage, they want that feeling every time they walk on that they are a national act. And if you don't, the thinking is if you don't even bother to do that, that you're not worth spit. And that is what got me about the statement of, well, we're up there, an A band looking like a D band. But are we really? And I learned that lesson going down to Nashville and walking Lower Broadway. And, most of Nashville will tell you if you work Lower Broadway, you'll work Lower Broadway most of your life and you won't get anywhere. Yet there's those heroes, those few people that make it. When I talk about Lower Broadway, for those that don't know, Nashville uh, has made a scene in their lifetime by developing talent through the venues that could use the talent that wasn't on the Opry. The Opry is literally next to Lower Broadway, and the famous thought process is, uh, one of the big famous stories coming out of the Opry back in the day was right behind the alley of the Ryman is Tootsie's, and Tootsie's was a place where, Hank Sr. would slip out and have a drink and could play there randomly. And then, sometimes that would happen. They'd get done playing their major 7 to 9 or the 7 o'clock and the 9 o'clock show in the Opry, and then they'd kind of slip across the alley, maybe have a drink, and then play a song or two for the people that were coming to Nashville to feel a part of it. And that became this tourism thing to the point that when I went there in 97, there was every guy trying to make it, just learning how to play and cut their teeth in Nashville instead of just doing it in their backyard at home. They went to Nashville and started playing on the streets and started playing at clubs right next to the Ryman, thinking somebody's going to find me. Well, most people hear the term Music Row, and I did. I made this mistake about 1997. When I went there, I thought Lower Broadway in my first 10 minutes. And then when I figured out Lower Broadway wasn't it, that it was actually 16th and 17th Avenue and a number of businesses around that little conglomerate on the west side of town. And I realized that most of these record companies that were, starting, they'd buy a house down the blocks from RCA, or some of the major labels had buildings right over there where it was just starting to spread out in western portion of Nashville, right? So they built a huge building, then you get like RCA had a studio in a barn. What? And so you can go there and visit that studio to this day, and it's the NSAI offices now too. So Nashville Songwriters Association International, and so that was kind of my experience, is learning all this and then realizing that people were building studios down in those houses along that stretch of that road. And now it's just offices for management. Used to be some record labels, and they put literally a studio room, what was the dining room, behind the place, or the kitchen is now just a meeting area and a break room. And you can go in and record in a house that probably housed people back in the 50s, right? So Music Row is actually this different section of town compared to Lower Broadway. So a lot of people in Broadway or in Nashville started, referencing Lower Broadway in their songs too. And we'd cut our teeth there. And I didn't get a chance to necessarily do what I do up here down there, but I pretty much took the formula I learned watching down there, came up here and started doing it up here. And just the idea that, when I played in a coffee house at 19, I was doing basically what those guys were doing. When I got out of that coffee house, jumped on a bus and went to Nashville, they were doing the same thing I was doing. I thought, well, shoot, I had a lot to learn. And as I've been in the industry now, I came back to Wisconsin. I thought to myself, I got a lot to learn. And one of the first things that I learned was people are not going to like you if all you're doing is walking in and doing a one-off for 5 seconds. You come in and do one song and you think you're a hero, you're in trouble, right? I mean, nobody should take it for granted that easily, that you're going to prove with one song that you're going to blow the world away the rest of your career. Now, blow the room away? Yeah, do that. Have some fun. But come back, do 2, 3 more songs, and you watch the musicians in Nashville start looking at you like, at least back in the day when it was 97, I got a bunch of people making faces behind me, and not all of them were great. And was it because I sucked at singing? I didn't feel like that. I sucked. Let's face it. I sucked. I was learning. I still had no idea. But my view was, it can't be because of my voice. It's got to be because of what I don't know, which is 90% true. My voice didn't know either. I didn't know that my voice wasn't doing everything it needed to do that, right? But that wasn't it. That's literally, like I said, 10% of it. Just 10% of it is the main product putting out. The rest of it is your knowledge of your surroundings. And so when I came back to Wisconsin, I knew I needed to learn from other people, like the knowledge of my surroundings. I I, I find the first thing that I'm going to do is how to play with a band. For God's sake, I grew up in an era where karaoke became the thing to do. And it's still here to this day, decades later. And it was something to do that was rarer before that. It was tapes and records, and and a book in front of you. And it was not long after that when they started running TVs and it worked, right? You could do it a little more efficiently. So I was in that era when we could first start using TVs and really start kind of bringing it to every bar every day, didn't matter. And I learned from another guy who developed a company doing this. So it was like, yeah, I'll go run karaoke. Right away, I was kind of like, I can't just stand up there, sing for myself. It's not karaoke. I got lucky, got with a company when I got up here that, they heard me sing and they were like, good, he can sing. Never even could see if I could talk on a microphone, if I had any ability to do anything. You're just like, "Yep, you're hired, let's go. You can sing." You can sing, that's what got me a karaoke job, and why? Because most of the people who had a personality just talked. They didn't maybe have the ability to sing, so there was a lot in the market at that time that we just need a host to run a show. We're seeing that in trivia these days. Like, we just need somebody to come out and do trivia at the bars. They want more than just the first guy who started the company to start doing trivia at all their bars. And it's the same way karaoke starts. When a guy starts a karaoke company and people ask him, I like what you do. Can you give that to me? And then they realize I can't be there on that day, but I can get it for you. And then I see I'll make money. And so the big dreams start in entertainment where we think they can't have me, but I can give them something that'll pay me some money. And what I got in the hard lesson right off the bat was one of the first guys I ever did that for, where I hired somebody else to run a show in my name or in my company's name. Was suddenly when I first heard the term, you're selling me the Cadillac and giving me the Buick. Wow. Well, number one, it was kinda like, "You thought of me as the Cadillac?" But, I mean, that felt pretty good, but I did feel like, if I'm gonna put my name on something or I'm gonna do anything, doggone it, they better feel like I do when I go up there. But right away, you start figuring out this industry is about what separates you from everybody else, right? And you figure out in the long run, you need to learn all the little details. One, I just needed to learn how to make sure I knew how to sound good. What if my product's coming out, and I'm learning that every day with the internet, you guys. I screwed up on my last performance with PayPal and everything when I was just winging it and decided to do it the other night. And I've been in this industry a long time, and I felt pretty good about what I've been doing. And I'm plugged in direct now as far as my soundboard, and it sounds way better. I'm having internet glitches still. I apologize. I've got to get an add-on for running a network cable so I can be hardwired. But those are the little details, like, I don't need to explain that to you, right? I don't need to tell you how I make myself better. I just need to prove it. And that's what I started discovering too was I don't need to tell you how I make myself better. I need to prove it every time I'm up there, which means I need to get that stuff down so you don't even see it. Right? I needed to learn how to get my equipment together. So at karaoke, that's what I learned working for Scott Esser's Showtime Entertainment down in New Berlin, Wisconsin. And we were doing all southeastern Wisconsin. He was sending, we had 6 karaoke systems, and I became a regular worker for him. He lost a few that were very good that decided to go out on their own and just do it because they could, and no stress, and they didn't have to be under a company that kind of created stress for them. You know, Esther's under demand as a company, whereas if you can go solo, you now are the person taking on the stress, not the person who should be taking on the stress of your boss yelling at you. And Scott was a great boss. I think he did things that he could, you know, that would make things successful, and he understood everybody's individual issues. But in the end, what he said went. And sometimes when you didn't agree with him, you had to move on, right? So now I'm learning how to deal in business. And at that moment, what I found out later would be called internal customer service was something you learn the hard way. And I ran into some major deals where I had a vehicle accident. I had I was sick. I was doing things for money. And, you know, getting into the industry that way and learning all that, I mean, the main things I learned under Showtime was I learned how to be able to keep up equipment, and I learned that I had a talent and an affinity for making a live room sound pretty good for inexpensive equipment. I mean, I learned real quick long before that. There was one show I did. I tell people on stage, I did in Merrill when I first started playing acoustic. A radio station DJ named Steve Resnick took a chance on me and let me borrow his equipment. Just a couple of speakers, little 4-channel mixer, about, PV carry along amp mixer, and about, I think, a pack of like 25 to 40 discs of karaoke. That's it. And I ran a show and people had such a nice time, and it was a new for them because it was a new personality. It was a new person up in front of the stage that was doing something that they hadn't seen around town. So I think it was exciting at first, but I left for Nashville, so I never really developed it there. I just learned that I could do this. But when I got to Esser, I learned how to do it night in, night out. I learned how to set up other people. I learned people were asking me like, "Hey, could you stop by my show before you go to yours and like make me sound good?" So I'd get it squared away to the point that at least when they went from singer to singer, excuse me, they'd have a consistency, right? They'd have something that uh, they felt comfortable with when they weren't the savvy ones. But I just never looked at it like a bad thing. Yeah, let me come in and help you. I mean, there was times where it was kind of like, well, you should figure this out. I'm showing you how to do it, and they just wouldn't. And Scott used to sometimes chalk some of those people up for people who wouldn't do things mechanical. They would just, they were great personalities, and that's all they should have to worry about. But when you're leaving equipment with some people, I learned real quick you should have at least some knowledge of what's around you. And once it came to playing live music and in bands and going down to Nashville and getting that thrown at you was, I need to learn how to play with a drummer. I need to learn how to play with a guitar player so they actually give a crap that I know what they're doing, and they can feel comfortable next to me. Because I don't want them making faces behind me and I'll play 2 songs with them and I'll never see them again. How am I going to make it in the business? Right? So I took that time and I started, even during the karaoke times, I went to a couple of, when I say a couple, I mean, I try to be a fast learner, but I went to a couple jams, met a number of people. One of them was Mark Bernier. And for the people, they'll know who I'm talking about. But that was just one instance. I think I've seen many artists that, to this day, if I named them off, it'd be a pretty big list, and just watched them. They didn't know who I was. They had no idea who I was. I watched them, maybe tried to get up there, sing one tune, and I was off, but I just wanted to be amongst them, even for a moment. So I started having that affinity for wanting to go to a jam, and I would meet Michael Shawn, and he was running the jam by this time. Come to find out, we got in the industry very close to the same time, but Michael was already running jams. He was talented enough I could like lead a band. He already had that savvy nature of leading a band, and I didn't know his history before that, which I'm assuming is a lot longer than I'll ever know. And I make that assumption under the fact that his career has been as long as mine and probably stronger, right? Um, but I met Michael at a jam on 60th, just down the road from my house, and he let me sing a couple of songs, and it felt good, like I could match up, and he gave me a nice pat on the back, and then there were times where I felt like, I didn't know enough on guitar to even think I was gonna stand in the same room with some of these guys, and I didn't know how long he was ever around, but come to find out, his main starting of the business was those jams and really just getting going, and so we basically started about the same time. He just had way more mechanical knowledge than I did when it came to instruments. I mean, shoot, I taught myself. I don't know if he took lessons or taught himself, but he was pretty strong then in his 20s, early 20s. And so I felt like I want to be like that guy. I want to be strong like he is when it comes to leading a band. And so our career paths in Milwaukee area have paralleled quite a bit. He's probably done a heck of a lot more than I ever have yet, but there's no envy there. I think it's the idea that I certainly want to feel like I want people to look at my career where they can. There's a lot of people who love what Michael Shawn does, and Michael has spent a lot of time uh, being out amongst other people and really selling what he has every day in, day out. I feel pretty strongly that I've done that. There are certain things that I just haven't or won't, or maybe felt like it was a line to cross that I wouldn't go and do, that he's completely willing to do for his career, which is awesome. Sometimes it's also right place, right time, someone who believes in you. And Michael's made more friends probably in the long run to get that opportunity, right? I I think there was a time in my life where I determined that if I'm going to take those chances, they're going to be willing to spend the money on me. Otherwise, I'm not taking those chances. And maybe that's left me out of being at the doorstep of LA or Nashville because of that decision, right? But I've always kind of with the idea of having big equality. We'll get into more of that. We're at our first 20 minutes, y'all. So I just want to take a little break to show you what you're watching. You can like and subscribe down below. You're watching DAHL Media.
So I'll tell you, the things they want to talk about, the things I want to talk about are kind of crazy. It's stupid stuff in Jeff's head for 200, Alex. What are we talking about, Jeff?
Dang. So just having my sip here. Hi, guys. We're back. Just my little 10-second break of station identification, I guess is the thought process from the radio back in the day. I learned a lot of my stuff listening to Bob Uecker at Milwaukee Brewers games. Let's face it. Most of us who ever listened to Uecker would rather listen to Uecker, and most of us that didn't want to listen to the guys on national TV when it came to Packer games listened to Jim Irwin and Max McGee for the longest time during Packer games. So we'd literally turn off the TV and deal with the delay of the TV listening to radio. So a lot of what I ever learned about talking on a microphone and being entertainment to people started from radio. Right. And started from listening to guys on the radio. When I was a kid, we lived near Rob Edwards. And Rob Edwards used to come hang out at the townhouse pool. And some of his friends from OKY would come out there. And then Rob became the Milwaukee Brewers voice forever. And later in the industry, I would like to consider him a really good friend. Later in the industry, a good friend of mine would take over for Rob. And I think it's just amazing that he got that job. But I listened to Rob as a kid, he very smooth voice, and Euchre and all that stuff. So when I got into karaoke, what made me really decent, I feel like, is that, yeah, you could sing. And yeah, people would let me sing for quite a while, which can be a detriment because your goal is it's karaoke. Everybody's to sing. Like, this is to get you guys excited, not to listen to me all night, right? And I started taking it like that. If you're listening to me all night, then why am I under somebody else's name? Was the thought. Like, why am I not developing that thought process? But at the same time, my responsibility was to the company I'm with, and the company I'm with is what I promote. And so there were still venues I could sing. My first time at Hosers, I sang all 4 hours, but people were dancing and, like, it felt like DJ night with me actually using my voice. But I knew that's not how this had to run. Like, you don't approach this that way, and you don't come in going, "This is my show. You're gonna like me." You have to have that gusto, that that charisma. But what you really figure out is that's not what it is. What it actually is because you bring an atmosphere they want to be a part of. So I still wanted the idea that it's karaoke didn't put the expectation on me being a singer for this show to be successful. So when we did have a night when I wasn't singing that much because there was 10, 12 singers in a row and I got to figure out how to get all these people up there, I didn't sing. Well, the owner can get disappointed. The Some of the people may get disappointed if that's all you've ever developed your show as. So I always went right from the front end trying to get people to start singing if I could, but I didn't, it lent towards me singing a lot. And some people I found out shied away because they felt you already have that guy. You don't need me singing. And I felt like, yeah, but this is an American Idol. Nobody's judging you. Come on. And so I had to kind of use that as my spiel. And so I learned a spiel like Bob Uecker when he'd start leading into talking about his sponsors and talking about the events coming up for the baseball games, knowing that they're going to announce the next Brewers game this week. Listen to us again coming up. The Brewers are doing this. And so I started applying that to my hosting. And so I'd look around the bar and the only information I could take in was, hey, they got daily food specials over here. Hey, they've got nightly drink specials over here. You guys can see them, but what was happening is everybody I was talking to when I first started was staring at the TVs. They weren't looking at me. It was like I realized right at that moment when I first started a karaoke show, and they're like, "Oh, it's karaoke, great." Right? They're looking at the TV, they're talking to the bartender, they don't want something that's just driving them nuts, so I started kind of playing the radio DJ. I've walked into bars where the radio station's playing and they got commercials playing for a little bit, then the DJ talks, and then the song comes on. And I thought, well, if I'm gonna be a part of the atmosphere of this room, I want this room to like me, so I'm gonna be a part of the atmosphere to the point that all I gotta do is nudge that envelope a little bit, and they'll know I'm actually in the room with them, and then I'll get them. And what I started discovering was hooking them in. Like, all I needed was 1 or 2 people to kinda turn their head to respond to what I was saying, then I knew they were listening. And that was it. Uh, so I would run with that, and I remember years into my karaoke career, what would happen? What would happen? So these owners would come to me, "Hey, man, I don't know what it is, but it's like when you do this, you just say the right things and like you actually talk about what we have in this house. So when people come here, it actually makes them want to do it." And I would hear how DJs and karaoke guys would just sit at chairs and people I've worked with. I won't mention names now, but people I've worked with where they just sit at the chair and it might be an hour in, like, "Hey, come on, guys, like, you want to do something." One person will walk up to him, ask him about songs or something. If it's dead, they look at it like, "What am I playing for?" And they sit on their duff. And I'm thinking, well, but what if a new face walks in? Are you not going to? But if you don't stay consistent and you only cater to the new person walking in, and well, then it looks like you're only willing to step up when a new face comes in and you kind of bombard them. So for me, it was like keep a consistent atmosphere, play some decent music, sing some decent music, talk about stuff every 4 songs, every 3 songs, carry on a conversation once in a while, and then start the next song. For me, I could sing, so I could take advantage of nobody being in the room and sing a song to make people turn their heads, and they would invite people to stay. I say all that to know that one of the things that really helped, and I'm not giving you any graphic details or anything different, and I really should. So you should see what you're watching. And this is the conglomerate. I made Lone Wolf Entertainment a long time ago. If you guys look up in the corner of your screen, I made Lone Wolf Entertainment in 1998. And it was not long after I had quit Scott Esser's group. And I actually went and got a day job, wasn't pressing the idea of doing it. And I had a bar call me and ask me if I was getting my own equipment because they really wanted me to run the show and I wasn't working for anybody. And I finally said, "All right, I'll get some." And I borrowed some for like 3 shows. And that first show I consider the first time that Lone Wolf Entertainment got started. So when it got started, it was just me. I was the lone wolf. I stepped away and I was the howling in the corner. And that was all that noise I was going to make. If you liked it, then I'll howl for you all night. And so it became this thing where a few people that had known me for a short period of time started liking what I was doing and asked me to stay. And that company, as far as karaoke, had been around 5 years. And I just started the band when it was 3 years. So I did that. And I felt pretty successful. What I started discovering, and I kept thinking, everybody wants a house gig. If you can be Ryan Seacrest, walk in, talk, host, let everybody else do their thing, then you've made it in the karaoke industry. If people want to know your opinion, if people want you to be the host, but yet still they want to all be the singers too, and they want you to create the atmosphere like Dick Clark did. That was my job. That's what I started thinking about was I'm Dick Clark, I'm Ryan Seacrest, and I just happen to be able to sing too. So I'm kind of Billy Dean, who started hosting about the 90s, mid 90s or so, started hosting shows for country music. He was a singer, could have sang every song on that show if he'd really wanted to, and everybody'd be like, "Yeah, you're great." But he was giving it up for everybody else that also was really great and was promoting his industry and promoting people around him. Now I'm not going to take credit for anything, but I do feel like there are people in the industry who came to those shows who now have careers of their own. And I feel like the atmosphere I created that gave them a chance to do that a few times, sometimes a whole year, are now and have been fairly prominent in our industry in Southeast Wisconsin. And I've never gone publicly except for a few of my friends that are hanging out with me and like patted my chest like I had something to do with it. But I feel proud that I hope I was a positive part of their career. Um, a positive part of their career. And one of them I feel very proud of, and I don't talk about it much, but they were a singer at my show at a place called Sharky's in Waukesha, which is now Q Club of Wisconsin. If you guys didn't know, that whole DJ booth sound system, lights, speakers, the sonic speakers that I think they've been changed out now, but all the speakers that are alongside that bar, I'd like to say were because of me. And they built so I'd come in and not have to bring in a bunch of equipment. And they asked me what they should get, and so that rig could play karaoke discs as well. And that rig had the ability to run 3 microphones to sing to and the whole 9 yards, and it's still there to this day. That was 2002, I believe they built that rig. 21 years, you guys. That rig is still there. And you know, they built that because they wanted me to be able to come in and run karaoke. They also wanted to let other DJs come in without bringing a mile worth of equipment, which I started noticing was happening. Was they'd have to hire people that would drive up in trailers just to DJ at night, and they thought, we're going to house this, we're going to make the dance floor. All they got to do is come in and spin the records. They were going to save money that way, but they literally made my pay go up. They gave me more money to stay. And I felt loyal to what they were doing, and they gave me 3, 4 years of just amazing years of strength in my company and what I was doing, uh, and Ryan, I appreciate to this day. Uh, Jimmy the bartender, Jay the bartender, the girls who I like to call the Boiled Frog girls. When I first ever got into singing at all, that it was Boiled Frog in Milwaukee, and that's where I went and tried out for Scott Esser, and they gave me a job. And everybody at Boiled Frog moved. A few of them moved over to Sharky's. Teresa, Mary Jo, you know who you are. They convinced the boys that owned Sharky's to hire me on at karaoke, and I had a long running career with them. And so all that experience, and then we'd start the band because of that place. And I'd start the Wolf Pack because I was no longer alone anymore, right? I was no longer this guy. I had people who wanted to be around, and one of them was Dan Albrecht. Dan was a karaoke guy, just loved to drink and play pool, and obviously he's a blue collar. Didn't matter, roofing, landscaping, siding, didn't matter. You asked him to do it, he'll take the job, and I admired that about him. And his twin brother Dean would come out, and I made my first album and started throwing it at everybody while I was running karaoke. And he took it home. I went down to Nashville for some stupid contest thing we won. It wasn't even a contest. I bought some stuff and they said, here's a free recording session, is what it was. But we were down doing this recording session, and he calls me up and he's like, hey man, I learned like 6 tunes off your album with a bass player friend of mine. You want to start a band? And I was just kind of shocked that somebody wanted to do it. And I didn't know him from Adam. He'd been playing Tejano with his stepdad, but he wasn't like an industry major or anything like that in Milwaukee. But it was kind of cool, and we were green as hell. And uh, those moments are what really start developing what I figured out to be decisions, tough decisions, difficult things in success. But what I realize is all it takes is that chance to do it, and it can happen fast, right? And we made waves in the beginning. My quality to a lot of bands might not have been up here, but I felt like we were forging something stronger than just being a flash in the pan. And so we wanted to develop I wanted to develop the band as if we were, you know, Aerosmith, Boston, 80s rock bands that played together no matter what. And so that mentality kind of went into it, but that certainly, you start realizing the struggles as a local group trying to keep something that strong when maybe the other members aren't in the same camp with you. One of the things that I respect about those 80s rock bands was the idea that through thick and thin, success was going to happen. They'd do what they decided they were going to do. Once the success happened, they would stick to that. And even when there was problems, which, most of the time led to alcohol and drugs and all partying and steered people different directions, why bands ever fell apart. But the one thing that made them successful was believing in that product, even when people personally had issues. And when the issues, right then I said to myself, when the issues off stage outweigh the performance on stage, is when changes need to be made. And so I allowed a lot of personal stuff out because I wanted it to be a team. I was fairly transparent with a lot of what I was doing, and I was very bold in some things I said to the band at the time. But to me, it was important, right? And when you figure out that, you're Geoff Landon, but they don't care, they're not on that same page as Geoff Landon, you know, and that's okay. They don't have to be, right? But when you're trying to build something you thought they had to be, they have to be about me or forget it. I went about that the wrong way, truly. And so I learned real fast, it's about me only to the extent of because I was driving it, but I wanted the band to want to be a part of it. And I felt like, well, then I need to be stronger. I need to be a better singer. I need to impress so many people that band wants to be with me just because I can impress so many people. So I put a lot of onus on myself to say, God, I got to be the greatest singer ever. I got to be, what we all strive to be Michael Jordan in basketball. We all strive to be what Tom Brady now in football. We all strive to be that hero, right? So for me, it was Tim McGraw. For me, it was I want to be like Tim. I'm going to be with a bunch of guys that are awesome in the band, and I want to go out there and make people happy. And so that's kind of where the be like Tim thought started from. And why? Because it was the song that launched me into singing at all was Don't Take the Girl. So I was kind of inspired by that, but I felt like I didn't want, I'd been with my keyboard player, Scott. My goodness, he stayed with me for 14, 15 years and beyond. He played with me in a number of shows that wasn't necessarily our band, but, uh, I made really strong friend in Scott and he believed in that process and he understood when I was under stress. He cut his lines when he felt I was crossing them, but he also gave me a lot more leniency than anybody ever did. Maybe maybe he felt less of a player than most people, so he thought that in his head, like I don't have a leg to stand on because but I never looked at Scott as somebody who couldn't play. I never looked at my best friend as somebody who couldn't handle his business and do it. But I also felt like if he wasn't, I was going to tell him. Right? And we had that mutual respect. We pushed each other to be better and we found people that surrounded us that could see that. Right? And I felt like, I wanted to grow this. We were still the Wolf Pack. As long as Scott and I were together, we were still the Wolfpack, and we were still driving it the way we believed each other to do. And um, we got advice from different people that even played with us that said, there were moments where they would laugh at us, but yet here they are, playing alongside of us now, and so I felt pretty good about what product we were putting out. Where does that lead us into the industry? Well, we're on our third 20, so I'm going to give you guys 10 seconds to take a break, and we'll move into that and why I talk about the Milwaukee industry the way I do. Here you go.
So I'll tell you, the things they want to talk about, the things I want to talk about are kind of crazy. It's stupid stuff in Jeff's head for 200, Alex. What are we talking about, Jeff?
Dang. Yeah, dang. I went on a tangent again, guys. I started talking about myself, which is fine. Because that's the show is about those experiences and what they can do for you as well. And if they interest you. Today it just happens to be about a bit of my history that has led to things. Now, the karaoke I was talking about and some of those people that I'd love to talk about because I'm very proud of them and what they've done. They've gone through tough times in their life too that nobody's going to ever know but us, but to me, they have done amazing things with what they have in their career. And one of those I feel like is Jen Schaefer. Um, she was a great singer then. She knew what she had. Um, but she was singing for friends a lot at karaoke shows when she was real young, and but she was great. I could sing with her any day of the week. I'd love to sing with her because she'd let me harmonize for her, and I like being the backup to somebody who makes beautiful music happen. And so many more people got to experience that once she got into bands, and she dove in headfirst as well. I had my band by the time I met her too, but those early days, just before I started my band, she was coming to my karaoke shows at Sharky's, and it was a joy to have her visit. And I felt like there were moments that maybe, hopefully, I don't know. She can tell me someday herself, I guess, but that inspired her to be who she is. And I love all that stuff that she's doing. There are moments when I think that some bands wasted her time, but she shined so bright like a diamond, and it's really paying off. And so there you go, Jen Schaefer. I'm very proud of you. I don't know if it matters, but in my life, you've had an effect on mine too, where you inspire me now, and I want you to know that seeing your success still makes me want to do things that make a difference, and know that what you do make a difference in the industry. Appreciate you. Also, Katie Beth, uh, who we have some personal times of hanging out together, and she knows personal things about me that are what they are. I'll let you guys think what you want. It doesn't matter. We know. But we had amazing conversations. Once I made my last album in '08, she really expressed a lot of interest in doing that too. She was karaoke girl who loved Martina McBride, and her voice showed it, her power, her what she felt like her range could be. She always asked me questions, even when I was just a lowly karaoke host. And, I wasn't a big major recording artist, and they asked me advice. And she followed some of my footsteps as far as advice. She went to exact people. I think she followed what she thought was quality. And I appreciate that she did that she went to my friend's Lee Turner at his studios at the time, and saw that what I did was quality enough that she would want to start that way too. Now she learned a few of the lessons that I was worried about, but she's, in her own daily life, she still shines like a diamond. And if you get a chance to see her sing, she's very powerful, very strong personality, and does a great job. And I know she probably doesn't feel her career advanced as far as she ever dreamed it could have, but I think she's achieved exactly what she wanted to, and that is to be the person she is through her career. And she still is a successful woman no matter what. So just want to toss that out there too to the people I appreciate. You know that. I just there's so many more. There was a time when I was in need of players. I rotated members. Scott and I counted about 25 guys, 20 to 25 guys. Uh, yeah, and I say guys because most of them were men, but uh, in like a 6 month span. And it was hard because we were just trying to keep an entity going. We didn't know, we were keeping an entity going and still trying to put out quality. So we were, beating down the bushes trying to find people that wanted to stay on permanently, and it was hard to find because probably because of me, probably because, they thought Geoff Landon and the Wolfpack must be Geoff Landon's band and he's the only guy. And I may not believe in that. And that may be true. I could be wrong. There was probably choices of my talent wasn't strong on guitar playing, but I never viewed my guitar playing as the thing. I always viewed this guy as the thing, right? So who would come along but this young kid, um, Brian Balin, who now, if you all in the Milwaukee industry don't know who this kid is, you're blind or deaf. You should know who it is. And if you don't, go see him. He's playing percussion, playing drums for Rebel Grace. Now that's a small world that uh, I feel a part of. Uh, uh, I I gotta say this, Jeremy. I love your reaction because I know you guys weren't permanent members of whatever I had done, but that know that you helped. You obviously helped my career out as much as any time, and you guys know that. You guys know that you're. I say you guys because Brian, Jeremy had a little teenage rock band at the time, and they were pretty damn good, and they were just playing some of these smaller bars, and they had big dreams of doing a record label, the whole nine yards. And they went through their little struggles too, but in that time, they introduced their services to help me out, and I wanted them on. If it weren't for a casino, I would have hopefully hooked them in for years to come, but the casinos wouldn't allow anybody under 21 to play, and that forced my hand on a certain situation that changed everything I was doing. And no, to this day, if something would have worked out, it would have been freaking amazing. And they're talented sons of guns, and now they get to share their talent with you guys in Rebel Grace so much. Jeremy has developed into quite the front man, and always had that ability. But I think he still plays guitar player at heart first, and that's where you are, brother. You are becoming a complete package in your own right if you want to be. And he has established probably more of a prominence than I have in my lifetime, and that's just by the character of a person he is. And so I send that out to you guys. Elliot, who played for Rebel Grace for quite a while, I was lucky enough to play with him for about 6 years, and he joined Rebel Grace, and they asked me to help out one time, and made me feel pretty good. So that's a shout out to some friends in the business. And there's the degrees of separation, if you're wondering. Uh, I have other opinions on certain situations and things that have ever happened, and I'm sure they know it. But I don't make the world go round. I'm just another guy from the industry that hopefully people think did all right. That being said, more about the Milwaukee music scene, right? Uh, let's talk about the nowadays. I don't mean that in any specific direction. It just sounds like it. But uh, the era now, has been developed quite a bit with people that I've known. Now, I knew the industry uh, late 90s, and I knew of the industry coming all the way in from the 80s, but never really was a part of it to those late 90s. And I could tell you from my perspective who I felt was, the top notch groups at the time, and there was a niche to jump in. Uh, there was a niche to jump in for me. I felt like country music at that time, being that it was starting to switch to this very popular set of songs, when a lot of the groups were hanging on to still the 80s and like the line dance success. We were just 2000 was coming. There was a lot of modernization, rock and roll really starting to rear its head in what country music as a popular music was. So there was the Garth Brooks era, and then there was, like to me, the development of what would become Tim McGraw, what would become, the Keith Urban days, when Keith Urban was coming out of the ranch in 97, 98, and then the solo career kicked in. Brad Paisley, and two words, Blake Shelton. What Rick Allen said to me, the DJ from FM 106. He says, I'm giving you two words. This guy's going to be a star. And so, right about the Blake Shelton time, I wasn't in Nashville as long as those guys were, or in the industry the way those guys were, and they were fairly young. I think it took Tim like 6 months once he was in Nashville. He had a little bit of money behind him, that sounds like, but he had friends that wanted to play, and they were great, right? And so maybe if I'd have done in that formula, gone down, started playing with some great players, and just really developed a persona down there, maybe I'd be somewhere. But I came home to learn a lot of things I felt I needed to learn in the business before I do that, because I felt like I'd get stepped all over. And so, yeah, the now industry in Wisconsin is developed by a lot of that, especially the country music side. I feel strongly about where I was and where that industry is now. Uh, is probably the same people who wanted to kick my rear end when I was in the beginnings of my career, and those people coming up as I was in the later uh, years of the Wolf Pack, where they were like, "Yep, we got to knock those guys off of whatever mental they thought I was on." And I felt pretty strongly about the business model that we were starting to develop and stuff. And uh, I think now it's all over there. And I'm going to use the word now because there's a guy, Michael Rosa, who is a businessman extraordinaire and a pretty damn good guitar player. And he's developed a formula for the now that's quite amazing. Uh, and had to make changes as well recently. I know it's not easy. Um, uh, but has developed quite a successful product, right? And so then you look at the Cherry Pies of the world, who are now and have been for a long time, but they've really started developing it into something. And I was teammates with Chris Steelman, who's a bass player for uh, Cherry Pie. We were in Oil Can Harry together. Ironically, it would be Michael Shawn era. I'd replace Michael in that group for a year and try my hand at rock and roll for a little while to have some fun. And they were nice enough to let me do it. Uh, I got to feel maybe a moment of how Michael felt playing rock and roll. Uh, and Chris and I had been spirits. Before that, I went to a New Year's show that he was playing with Rabbit Aardvarks, and we sang together one off and sounded pretty good together. And it's probably what got me the gig for a little bit in Oil Can. But he would move to Cherry Pie, and I know his marketing thoughts like jumped on Cherry Pie like right then. Like Cherry Pie figured out what they had in a heartbeat. And I know Chris has a lot to do with some of the marketing that Cherry Pie has done in the past few years that has really launched an exceptional thing that was already pretty daggum good in the first place. So they picked a good team member uh, to really even add more to what they've already had. So Chris, shout out to you. Um, uh, there is a lot of talent that you guys don't see every day. And for those of you that might be across the world that might check out this video or ever see me talk about this stuff, the Milwaukee area does not have a Hard Rock Cafe. Can you tell me why? I want you guys to take a moment with that. I'm going to take a little bit of time, and I want you guys to come on back and see me at the next episode. Why Milwaukee does not have a Hard Rock Cafe and why it should. I think you guys stick around with me for the newest episodes of What Are We Talking About, Jeff? Thanks for seeing DAHL Media. Get down there, like, and subscribe if you can as well. I know I do these at the end of the videos, actually saying that right off the bat. But if you like, hearing the history of Wisconsin music and maybe where, my opinion on what the modern take is on it and just the stupid stuff in Jeff's head, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
So
Dang.
that's kind of it.